Hello everyone, my name is Victoria Majestic, and this video is a part of a series called Decoding the Masters, where I demonstrate master studies of famous paintings, focusing on different elements. The last video was about muted colors in the landscape. Today's video will be about saturated colors, saturated greens in particular, how to mix them and apply them to the canvas. And the artist whose painting I will be studying and copying, his name was Jean Camille Corot. You might have heard his name. He is a very famous landscape painter from the 1800s. I hope you will enjoy it. The surface I will be working on is a canvas pad, or actually it's a piece of linen from a canvas pad. And I just taped the back of it and attached it to this canvas panel. Also, I placed the tape here on the canvas because the original painting is not exactly rectangular. The ratio of the layout of the canvas is a little bit shorter than a rectangular, so that's why I taped it off at this point. This was just an estimate, since it's not an exact replica as usual. It's just a study of the original. The tools I'm using generally is a palette knife, offset, metal, and bristle brushes, different sizes, smaller, larger. These are number 2 and number 6 brush, and the colors are listed below this video, so if you are interested you can check it out. Now before I start painting, I always create a simple sketch, and for the simple sketch I use a sienna mixture. You could use anything as long as you dilute the paint enough so it's a consistency of a watercolor. So when you paint on top of it, you can easily build up paint without any problems. And when it dries, it doesn't cause any problems because it's not a fat mixture, meaning the oil content of the mixture is not significant. So Cadmium Red Light, Ultramarine Blue, and solvent. What I'm using is Gamsol. I already divided up my original, as you can see it on the screen. Now I will do the same thing. This is a simplified grid method that I'm using to make the sketching process easier. And what I'm doing is dividing up the canvas into equal parts or halves, and now I will mark where the quarters are in distance, vertically and on a horizontal plane as well. Once I have these, I'm just going to create the simple sketch based on these lines. And this is it's not, I wouldn't say it's very accurate when you're doing it just loosely like this, but since it's just a study, it's perfectly enough. So looking at the original, the artist used golden ratio, or divided up the canvas the way where the sky is almost 2/3 of the canvas and the bottom part is 1/3. Well, not exactly, it's a little bit more and falls about here. So this is the horizon line that I'm marking now, and I will connect this loosely. And after that I will find a placement of the road, because that's a significant shape in the painting. And I'm just estimating where it's gonna end. Roughly starting here. And roughly ending here. Now, something is a little bit unusual that the artist, well, it seems like one of the focal points in this painting could be a secondary focal point, but it's definitely part of it, is this carriage with the horse. And it falls pretty much to the center of this vertical plane, which is a little bit unusual arrangement. Usually the focal point is placed off center just for the purpose of to create a stronger composition. But in this case, the focal point is very close to the center. And as you can see, there is no detailed drawing, just simple lines and shapes. I will start this demonstration, the painting part obviously, with mixing the colors, and in particular the sky colors first, because it appears to be that the artist mixed those or blocked in the sky first. What I see is several colors, so I'm preparing a few little pile of titanium white, and the two dominant colors in the sky are violet, blue violet, and a warm yellow or off-white. So for the warm yellow, I will start with adding yellow, orange, and tiny bit of blue to the white. And what I'm getting here is a nice buttery color, buttercream. And this is good enough for me as a starting point. Also, I will mix a color that I see besides the violet is a pinkish, rather muted pinkish color. So for that I will be using a little bit of the leftover from the sketch, which was sienna, and a little bit of the Cadmium Red Light. And I will add this to my white here. And this is way, way too strong for what I was aiming for. I will need to add more white. And I will also add a little bit of blue, additional blue, which will help me to mute this color. No more white. I'm sure I can get it from here. And a lot more white. And I will also add a little bit more blue. This helps me, again, this helps me to mute the mixture. I'm happy with this result, and finally I will mix my purple. When I say blue purple or blue violet, that means that the dominant color in purple is the blue. And what it means in simple terms is when the blue is dominant, not the red, that it's a cooler color, generally cooler. Of course, it depends on what we are comparing it to, but generally it's a cooler color mixture, as if the red, in this case crimson, alizarin crimson, would be the dominant. And I need to adjust this because the crimson is such a strong pigment, it pushed it into a more red violet, which is exactly what I didn't want. So I need to push it back toward the blue. Therefore, I will increase the blue here. And this is more like what I was aiming for. And finally, I will have one more little pile of yellow, starting with titanium white again. This one will be lighter and a little bit cooler, so I'm using Cad Yellow Light with the white. And it's not a strong yellow, as you can see it. All right. So now that I have these mixtures, I will start to apply it to the canvas. There is one more color I have in mind that I know I definitely will use in the landscape part of the painting, or the ground. That is a ochre, a muted ochre. So before I actually start with the sky, I rather going to mix that ochre too, because I think I might be able to use it in the sky as well. So generally for ochre we can use 3 colors, the 3 primaries, which is yellow, red and blue. And in ochre always the yellow is the dominant color, and that's why we call it yellow ochre. So a small amount of blue, small amount of red, and I mix it to see where I'm at. And it's way too yellow still, so I will increase the amount of red and I will increase the amount of blue. I will also add some white to this, just to calm it down. This is very chromatic and I want it a little bit less chromatic and a little bit less vibrant as well. So again, increments are easier than overdoing it all at once and try to bring it back to where you were going originally. So I rather mix increments. And I'm happy with this ochre. I will use a larger brush to block in the sky, and I will definitely start with the violet part because that's so dominant. And I will add just a tiny hint of the ochre to mute this violet slightly. I don't want it to be too strong. I'm not using any medium with the paint. This is just straight out of the tube. It seems like it has an okay consistency. If it was very sticky, I would definitely add a medium to it. Usually what I use is safflower oil. And I'll keep adding the ochre. Before I start to mix my greens for the landscape, I will create, or rather mix my darkest darks. And on the picture you can see it's around the wagon and also near the large tree in the foreground. For that I will be using a phthalo blue, and I will mix it with some Alizarine crimson, and I will also add a little bit of cad yellow light. And what I got here is a very dark, and a screen, probably it appears to be black mixture that's a greenish, that has a greenish hue, and generally cool or cooler temperature. And I will use my larger brush again, but I will have to get a clean one for this because the other one I used, it still contains some white, and for the darkest dark that wouldn't be too good. So I'm using this, and I'm going to just loosely, really loosely block in some of these darks, and it's still a little bit on the blue side, so I will add a tiny bit more yellow. And I will add this dark here as well. And actually I'm putting it in the wrong spot. Sorry. So, no, actually there's one dark here. And the other dark shape, I'm gonna need a little more of this. So the other dark shape is right here on the side of this wagon. The function of the darkest darks primarily, or at least blocking in the darkest darks at the beginning, helps to determine all the other colors, because this is an extreme, and it's really not the other colors but the other values in the painting, what it helps to determine. And then there are some dark darks up here between these two trees that I want to block in. All the other darks are slightly lighter because they're further in the distance, and that makes them a little bit of a lighter green. I need a little more of that dark here. And up here. I might make some adjustments as I progress with the painting, but this is a good starting point for me, blocking in these darks. And finally, these here. Now some of these darks are going to be covered, as you will see, but not 100%, and that is really the whole point here, blocking it in first. They will be partially covered with the lighter greens. And there will be this tree, which I will just slightly block in, and I will come back to it and make it darker later. I'm adding a tiny bit of cadmium orange to this, so it's a little bit more natural green. And I'm trying to keep the edges relatively soft and open, because there are no hard edges in this tree whatsoever. And this is already not darkest dark, it's just a dark green. Maybe a tiny bit more of those darkest darks in this corner, but nothing significant. And a little bit here, which I need to make it a little darker than this. And this is pretty much it as far as blocking in the darkest darks are. The next step will be me mixing the other greens. I will start by mixing the greens in the upright planes and in the foreground shadow. Those are the darkest greens. So all the trees are upright, the big one in the foreground too, and then the shadow values in the foreground are about as dark, maybe a little darker than some of the uprights. So that is going to be my first step, and after that I will mix the other greens and the dirt color. So to start with these, I will use Ultramarine Blue, and I will use a pretty good amount. Put it here. And I will add a small amount of yellow, cadmium yellow light, and mix it together. It's still a little too dark. So I will add more, but I will also add a little bit of cadmium orange to calm this green, to make it more similar to what's in the painting. And this looks a little better. It's still a little bit on the dark side. So I will step by step, little by little, keep adding small amounts of cad orange and cad yellow. And now it's getting very close to what I'm trying to achieve. And I'm going to test it here. It's better, but it's still not what I need. It's still too dark. And a little bit too raw. So for that, I need a little bit more of the orange, which obviously contains red, and red, since it's the complementary color of green, it will have to calm this green. And I'm still not exactly there. Still too dark. I think this should be the last step. Yes. So I'm happy with this result. After this, I will also mix the colors of the pasture or the grass, starting again with Ultramarine Blue. It's going to be a significantly lighter mixture. I will use again those two, just in a little bit larger quantities. And a lot more of them. And I'm approaching a similar hue to what's in the painting, but the value is still a little bit on the dark side. So I will continue the previous step or steps. And also, when we mix colors, need to think about, especially with oil paints, how much darker they get as the paint dries, and sometimes it's pretty significant. So it's a good idea to counter in that fact that it will get darker. And it's still not there. Now I just added some, and this is way too much, titanium white here, because there is a version of this green in the distance that is cooler and a tiny bit lighter than what's in the foreground. And I will add a little bit more blue, ultramarine blue, to this to make it cooler in temperature. So both the white and the blue helps me to achieve that. As you can see, this is a lot cooler than this because there is an increased amount of white and blue in this color mixture. And these are good starting points. For me, I might need to mix a little bit more so I have enough. especially of this average green. And I feel like I'm gonna need more. That's one of the trickiest part to figure out how much to mix. Rather overestimate than under is usually the better scenario than having to have to mix again. Mixing the dirt road is my next step. I will use some of the leftover from the sky here because it will work just fine for that. Starting with this cream yellow and this grayish color here. And what I will need is more Cad Orange, a little bit of Cad Red, and mix it together. I added too much Cad Red, so I will add more white. And obviously I added way too much Cad Red. I still have the ochre from the sky. I will use that too. And it helped, but it's not enough. I use more Cad Orange and Cad Yellow Light. So now this is really leaning toward a yellowish tone, and the road is a little bit more tamed, so I will add a tiny bit of crimson and blue. So crimson and blue is purple, which is a nice way to tone this color down. And I still need to do a little more of that. And a little more. I'm being really careful. Crimson has a pretty strong tinting power. And I can throw off the whole mixture real quick if I'm not careful. And I'm happy with this result. There's also some tan or brownish tannish color. And for that I need another pile of white mixed with, and I have leftover pinks here, so I use that, mixed with a little bit of Cad Red. And a little bit of blue, yellow, more of that, more blue. And I think the color would be okay. However, this is not nearly dark enough. So what I will do is take some Cad Red and Ultra. Have a darker base to start with. Tiny bit of this too. And add it to this mixture here. That's more like what I was looking for. Right, and now I have all the colors that I need to block in this painting. There are going to be some subtle violets in the distance that I might be able to use my leftover violet there. If not, I will add a little bit of crimson and blue to it. But pretty much you can see these really powerful saturated greens as opposed to my last demo where the greens were very muted and pale or not so saturated. This will result in a completely different appearance, different painting. Especially in the springtime or early summer when the greens are still fresh, the leaves and the grass, and they didn't dry out yet, or when there's lots of rain in the summer, then you have these more saturated greens, more chroma in them. Right now I am starting to block in my darker greens, which are mostly here in the foreground shadow, and partially covering some of these darkest darks. And I'm trying to follow the pattern of the grass here. It won't be exact, just similar. And some of the darks that show through, that I can see on a painting, they appear to be slightly warmer, not as cool as this phthalo blue. So what I'd like to do is add in, that's too much, a little bit of crimson to balance out this cool temperature. I just have to be careful because I can really lose those darks here. I'm using a little bit of black as well with crimson and ultramarine blue to regain those darks. Again, this is not pure black. It's a mixture of black, red, and blue. Pure black would appear to be very flat if I just did that, and lifeless. So I definitely would, or I am, avoiding it.